Welcome everyone to Nerd of the Rings. Today we have a special guest. You've seen him or his work, even if you didn't know it, in such things as The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Rings of Power, Godzilla x Kong, Avatar, Last of Us, Game of Thrones, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and the soon to come, or maybe, depending on when this interview goes out, the already released Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and so much more. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Luke Hawker.
Luke, hello.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, we had a little bit of hangout time in New Zealand, and I was like, we need to get Luke on for his own segment here. We had you on with Jed and all the Orc crew last, that's probably been 2 years ago now for the Rings of Power stuff. So, yeah, we needed to get you on, though, because you have an awesome story. I love hearing stories that you have from your years in Middle-earth, which are substantial. Yes. You started early. So why don't you start with telling us, first, I almost broke my streak there. My first question to everybody is, how were you first introduced to Tolkien? How were you first introduced to Middle-earth?
How was I first introduced to Tolkien and Middle-earth? So I was first introduced in school because we read The Hobbit.
Okay.
And so I read The Hobbit. I think when I was about maybe I want to say like 11 or 10 or something like that. And I remember thinking it was long. I have like dyslexia, like not really badly, but enough for the reading to be a struggle. And I remember really getting confused with the dwarves as to who was who. But then once we're on the adventure, I was just, I loved it. And I mean, Riddles in the Dark and Gollum was, I think, a part in the novels that still I envisioned when I'm doing creature stuff is that he's such a cool character. He's so creepy and he's so mysterious. And so Riddles in the Dark was my kind of entry into, wow, this is really freaky and wizards and stuff like that. And that was my entry. And then my brothers told me about Lord of the Rings, and they're like, it's amazing, you got to read them. And they're all like really quite academic. And I saw the books and I saw the three of them, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go outside and play.
But that, I mean, to be fair, going outside and playing kind of, helped prepare you for what you do now a lot, which is go outside or inside and play, depending on what you're doing, motion capture or, on location stuff, falling down. Yes.
Falling down. So I was about to say, when I went outside and played, it was usually on mountain bikes or BMX bikes, a lot of jumps, a lot of falling over, a lot of falling down, which set me up pretty well to
training.
Fall down for a living.
So then take us into, how did you get involved with Lord of the Rings?
So I started off when I was 11 and 12. Basically, I was a gymnast to begin with and a dancer, and then really got into acting. And that's kind of where my performance side was. The gymnastics kind of, was one of my big things. And I was pretty good at it. I got some, state champion sort of stuff when I was 12, 13. But also at the same time, I was doing a lot of like science fiction nerd, fantasy nerd, like Legend and Labyrinth and things like that. But I was doing a lot of model kits. So from the age of about 11 or 12, I just loved making model kits, usually based on films or TV shows. And my brother also did model kits, but he was my older brother, Ben Hawker. He was not Ben, someone else with a different last name, obviously. He was doing similar stuff, but he was very much into makeup effects and creature effects. And so me being the younger brother and him being the older, persuasive brother, he used to make prosthetics and stick them to me. And then we would shoot little videos, usually on a Super 8, so that like it's actual film camera.
Yeah.
And so we do little homages to Star Wars and homages to like a Terminator and Predator and things like that. And then we'd save up our pocket money and buy rolls of Super 8 film and then shoot these things. And that was kind of my childhood, was like mucking around, like think there's a shot of me. We did a ninja one once where they're like, my brother's like, I want you to see you jumping from our veranda, like a porch. Do you guys call it a porch?
Yeah,
yeah. It's like a porch. One story, 1.5 story sort of thing.
Okay,
yeah. Like, I want it to look like you're jumping up onto it. And I would have been about 11. And I'm like, oh, how am I going to do that? And he's like, I don't know, jump off backwards. And so we put put a little thin mattress down, and I jumped off backwards, landed, and then ran backwards into the forest. And then we reversed the film, and it looked like I was going jumping up. So so that was the first foray into stunts.
Wow.
That was kind of my childhood. And then. So my brother,
do you still have those films? Like, have you digitized those? Because those would make great Instagram posts, I think. I think we need those.
Okay, all right. Well, what I'll do is I'll talk to my mum.
Okay,
so
there we go.
She's just got a collage of them up in the Wairarapa in New Zealand. So I'll see if you got any of those videos, and then if I see any, I'll post them. But so that was my childhood, and then my brother, I was going full drama, full dance, acting, and all that stuff, performance, and then he did a course at a drama school in Sydney where we grew up, even though we're from New Zealand originally. He did a props course at NOTR, which was a pretty prestigious course, and then also at the same time, or a couple of years later, I was doing drama courses there as well. And so he then started working in industry in Sydney, and worked on shows like The Matrix, and Dark City, Dark City is actually, I don't know if you've seen that. Have you seen Dark City? It's a good one. It's a really good one. It's funnily enough quite similar to The Matrix, but slightly different. Starring not Jennifer Connelly. Who is in that one? But anyway, Dark City. It's a very fun. Richard O'Brien.
Jennifer Connelly.
It is Jennifer Connelly.
Yeah.
Yes. Good, Mike.
There we go.
I'm not that tired. But Jennifer Connelly's in it, and it's cool. It's cool. But he worked on that, and then The Matrix, and then was at a makeup convention in Sydney, and a man called Jason Doherty, who was coming over from Wētā, he said, Ben was like, are you a Kiwi? They just randomly met at the makeup convention, and Jason's like, I work at Wētā Workshop, and Ben was like, oh wow, you mean the people who did Brain Dead and Meet the Feebles? And he's like, yeah, and he says, and we're looking to hire some people on a secret project, and so my brother and him sort of hit it off, and then Ben was like, I've got to go over and work on the show, this random show, and then he turned up and he found out what it was. And then I just finished high school at the ripe old age of 18.
Wow.
I was like, I'm going to go, and I was a waiter, being a professional actor, so, being a waiter. And he, so cliched. And then he gave me a call and said, dude, just come over to New Zealand. And I'm like, this is when we get phone calls. And he's like, I can't tell you what it is over the phone, or I can't put it in an email, but you should come over and see if I can get you a job, because I had experience with prosthetics. And I came over, and he just said, hey man, met me at the airport and was like, it's Lord of the Rings. And I went, what? I remember saying, Peter Jackson, the guy who did Bad Taste, Brain Dead, Feebles, he's doing Lord of the Rings. And they're like, yep. And I'm like, wow, that's
and you were like, cool. That's that big book that I turned down reading to go outside. Yeah, that's right. And I'm like, and so that was I turned up, and I met Richard, which was intimidating. He was right in the middle of getting his army together to storm the creative walls of Khazad-dûm. And then I had a trial for maybe a couple of days to see how I did, and they liked my stuff, and then that was it. Off I went. Wow. So do you remember the first thing that you worked on when you started at Wētā?
Yes, I do. There were two things I worked on. One of them was a mold that Ben had made, and he told me that there was so when you make a mold, this is old school. You use plaster of Paris is what it's sort of like, but it's more like concrete. And he'd made a mold the day before, even the weekend before. And when you've finished, you do one side with the actor's face, and then you've got the sculpted plasticine, and then you put a little kind of chase around the side that helps get the product out. and then you build the other side. And sometimes the plaster or the stone will go around the outside and make a thick crust, and you just have to grind it off, right? And then you can pop the mold open. Anyway, it doesn't matter if you don't understand it properly, because I kind of Ben said, hey, I've made a mold. I don't know how thick I made the crust around the outside, but there's a sculpture in there that people have worked really, really hard on. But I need you to go and grind the mold open. And basically, if you, because there's plasticine right on the edge, but if you go too far with the plasticine, you start grinding into the sculpture.
Oh my gosh.
And so I went in there and started grinding it. And I was just like grinding blindly into a sculpture I didn't know, into a mold I didn't know. And I had only just turned up, and so I only had a face mask. And so my hair was like covered in dust, and I kept coming out going, bro, I can't find the edge. And but I found it and I cracked it and it was fine. I think that was it. I don't know what mold that was.
I was gonna say, well, now I'm curious what it was.
I think it was one of the first orcs.
Okay.
They had got going. But what I do clearly remember working on first was the Hobbit doubles. So they had the scale doubles for the 4 hobbits, and we were making the masks for the scale little people. And so that was Kieran and Pirate and Fon and all those guys. And so my task was to get their life cast, their mold, their face, and then get Elijah, Sean Astin, Billy Boyd and Dominic Monaghan, their eye distances, and then figure out the scale size down of what it was, and then put little eye formers and like drill into the scale double's eyes, put the eye formers in the right distance.
Oh my god!
That then they would start sculpting on top of and create the likenesses. And so I had to get it right. Because that was going to set their masks up and set the sculptures up, and also the distances away from their face. Because if you did it too far, they look like their face is elongated.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you did it too close, then their face would be mushed inside
for like
gosh. 4 years while they're running around.
Right.
Everyone's like, oh, their mask is great. Thanks.
Right.
But yeah, so that was my first job. And it was actually, interestingly, was one of the first time we had seen 3D printing.
Oh,
This is 1999.
Right.
And the 3D printing, they had scanned Elijah, Dominic, and the 4 hobbits' faces. And then they'd done like a laser cut, sort of like a mill of them out of wood. Yeah. And so they'd scaled them down, and then I think it had been done in America. Like we didn't have the technology to do it in New Zealand, and they sent us the scaled down faces, and that's what they were using as the basis.
Wow.
So it was and the thing is that it was so low res, because the steps, as they were like, imagine a block of wood and they've milled to mill their face. The steps down between each sort of cartographied layer was really, really quite a lot. And so you kind of, the sculptors are looking at it going, oh, yes, that's, and so, but yeah, it was kind of a wow technology for everyone. We're like, oh my God.
Yeah. I'm guessing that is quite different today. What you guys are able to do with 3D printing. Yes.
We and scanning as well. Like, at the moment, me being, as I call myself, super average man, because I'm generic kind of models for VFX. I'm pretty much exactly the right height, body shape, everything for generic humans. Super average man. That Luke Walker, he's always a generic human.
That's why I'm going to tell people from now on, when people are like, oh, what's Luke Hawker like? He is very generic and average. Yeah. There we go.
Super average.
Super average.
We're often using me to scan. So I'll get in a position, and then we just get a hand scanner and scan someone's face, and you can print their face and overnight, like take a scan of your face, put it on the computer, make it any scale you want, print it. It's so, where 3D printing and 3D modeling and that stuff has gone is just so different. Yeah. It's amazing. And in fact, like, if you think about the Hobbit feat, from where we started on Rings to where we went to on Rings of Power, the Hobbit feat was something else that I worked on as well when I first started, was foam latex. And I worked in the foam latex room. making all the Hobbit feet and the limbs and stuff. But the Hobbit feet were essentially slippers made out of foam latex, and then the cast would slip them on, and they were made in silicon and plaster molds, and there was a lot of work done back in there to get them right. But yeah, that was foam latex. And then in the Hobbit, Jason Doherty, myself, and Rochia Samuels, and a couple of other people pioneered doing silicon feet, because Jason, the blend around the top of the ankle was always really, really hard to do with foam. And so Jason had always wanted, because Hobbits wear shorts, was have the blend up but underneath where they went. But we didn't. The silicon technologies of back then weren't good enough in '99. So yeah, we went fully silicon, and then on the I was about to call them the Pioneers, because that's what they were called as their pseudonym on Rings of Power. But for the Hobbits on Hufflets, on Rings of Power, it was all digital. All digital. Not one physical sculpture. Not one physical mold. It was all digitally sculpted, digitally printed.
Wow.
And then
How about that?
It's the Hobbit feet have been our bread and butter for big hairy feet. Big hairy feet.
Now, between obviously we'll get to the Hobbit, but you worked on some films obviously down there at Wētā between those years, between Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. I was just looking at your IMDb, and like I was like I thought I knew a pretty good amount of what you had worked on, and I was amazed at how many I didn't know that you had worked on. But some of those early ones, obviously there's King Kong and Chronicles of Narnia. So what about those years in between the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit? What kind of memories stick out to you?
It was an interesting time, actually, because Lord of the Rings was such a massive job. Yeah. And I'm currently working with a team who many of them I first met on Lord of the Rings on the film I'm on at the moment. And it's such a formidable years for so many. Me specifically, because I moved back to New Zealand and stayed here, but also I met my wife. She was working in the foam latex room on the Return of the King. She came on Return of the King, and then I was working in the mold shop, and then we met over a bowl of foam latex, and so that was in 2003. That all wrapped up, and we kept thinking it was the end of Rings, right? And I was like, okay, this is the end. And then they did the pickups for film 3, which were like 130 days of pickups or something. So it was a whole nother film, basically. Yeah. But it just kept going, and we kept going, and we kept thinking, this is the last Orc we're ever going to do, or this is the last Hobbit we're ever do. And then there was a big red carpet event at Wellington for the world premiere, which I walked the carpet with my wife, actually.
Oh, nice.
And they walked from government buildings all the way to the Embassy Theatre along the red carpet, and my wife and I had helped put the Hobbit feet in, and we were walking with the Hobbits as they were going down. So there was this big fanfare of Lord of the Rings is done, it's all finished, and then we all just went, what now? And it was just really like, and Richard's like, yes, I guess we need to do some more work, right? and he'd gathered all these people together, and we, for people like me, it had been 4 or 5 years, and met my future wife, and we were like, what are we going to do with ourselves? And so there was a couple of things that we did, and Richard is so hungry for making cool stuff and new stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Such a creative force. But that's what he did. He was like, well, I want to make collectibles. I want to do, a whole new collectible range, and we're going to try and secure the rights for the Lord of the Rings, because what better way to have the people who worked on that than the people you buy, collectibles and work from. And so we did the Saruman, Saruman, when he's kind of
on the Palantir.
That was sculpted by Mike Asquith, who sculpted a lot of the orcs. He sculpted Lurtz, and he did that sculpture, and it was really different for us to do super, because we used to big creatures or armor and stuff like that. So to do a really small thing was really quite different for us. And so we had a whole new learning to do, and we'd obviously made little maquettes and stuff, but to have that, have that level of detail.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he took that off and got the license, and then we started making collectibles for Lord of the Rings, and it was an interesting time. But then in between then, we had every now and then a film or a TV show would pop up. And yes, King Kong, Narnia, and they happened at the same time.
Oh, really?
So they were shooting at the same time. And I remember usually, like on Rings, it was easy. It was one client, it was one job. You didn't have to go, is this a gun, or is it a sword, or is it a laser gun? It's just swords and sandals, swords and shields. And so when we did Narnia and King Kong, it kind of the crew didn't have to split. We had to expand again, which is really interesting. But lots and lots of armor and weapons. Yeah, lots and
not a lot of crossover between Narnia and King Kong.
No, there wasn't. And Narnia was so, the armor was so. It wasn't more detailed than Lord of the Rings, but it was a different way we approached it. Like on Lord of the Rings, it was very much make it the right way, mold it, and then cast it for when you got the stunts and stuff like that, and all the reproductions. Whereas Narnia was, we know the setup now, we're going to do as much as we can old school, but it was a little more kind of clean. It wasn't so gritty, and so some of the armor didn't need to be made with acid etch and things like that, which we still did. There was some ability to model make, especially for like the Minotaur armor that Callum Lingard sculpted actually, and it was very much, we made the base plate and then it was all just sculpting and stuff like that. But yeah, it was cool. And then we didn't do as much prosthetics for Narnia. Howard Berger did at K&B. They did a lot of the prosthetics for that.
Gotcha.
But we had to integrate our armor and stuff into the prosthetics, and so kind of we knew the shorthand of okay, where do the fawn's ears stick out, and how do we allow for it and things like that. And then King Kong, we did do the prosthetics for the natives. Which was really cool. There was some cool stuff in there, and then there was the spear that was really cool. I got to work on, where the first guy gets shot. Okay. The spear gets through him, and I don't know if you remember the film. So that was a fun little build that I did in between doing natives and then doing armor for. It was confusing. It was a confusing time, and then all the stuff to do with Kong, because that was back when we and also back when CG and computer generated creatures really needed physical sculpting in the first instance, because the sculpting I guess the programs weren't as good, or there wasn't enough people who could do the work. So we sculpted. A lot of the work was doing sculpting all the different creatures for Narnia in maquette form, and then sending them away to get scanned. Right. And then also with the Tyrannosaurus, the V-Rexes, and then King Kong and different body positions and stuff like that, and the T-Rexes. Those things were sculpted by hand by 4 or 5 people, every single scale. They're you can buy the wall plaques of them. For Wētā. But the actual big ones, they're massive, and the detail is smash bang. Just the detail that the team put into that, and then it was my job as the molding supervisor on that to make sure that detail didn't get broken or smushed through the molding process. Richard would say, so that mold you're making is on a $60,000 sculpture, and I'm just like, okay, don't stuff it up.
Oh my gosh, they really like putting the pressure on you with these molds, man.
The mold. Actually, it's funny. The mold shop, even with all this digital stuff that we're doing, the mold shop is still a very, very big part of any shop, because you've got the setup of all the creatures and the prosthetics, and that involves taking life casts or scanning or doing the sculptures, and then the next phase is if you're jumping down the line is okay, now we've made this shape, we want to make reproductions of it in different materials and the bit in the middle is always the mold. And the mold, you can only get it right once, because if you stuff it up you're basically like the story I told you at the beginning with my brother and the plaster.
Yeah.
You've got a beautiful plasticine sculpture. If you mold it wrong and you can't get the mold apart, you've just got a big rock.
Right.
you know, there's dinosaurs that you buy. You have to smash out of an egg. Yeah, if you smash a plasticine sculpture out of an egg like that, you just end up with crumbs and chewing gum. And
man,
and I have done that once or twice. Like, you know, I've made hundreds of molds in my career, but I've done one once where I kind of couldn't get it open, and I turned to someone. I said, "Oh man, it won't open." And they're like, "Oh, what did you use as a release agent, as a parting agent?" And I went, "Oh." And so I was like, picked it up, put it in the bin, go to sculptors and say, "Hey, sorry guys, but can you start that sculpture?
Can you do that again?" Oh my gosh. So what's that conversation like when you have to go? Because I am sure you're not the only person to have done that, you know, over 20 plus years at Wētā.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that maybe by the amount of molds that I've made, hopefully I've got the highest frequency, because it is only once or twice. Yeah. But it is not a nice conversation. Right. And the problem is that everyone has to know. It's not like you can kind of run and say, "Dude, you know that sculpture took you 3 weeks. Can you do it now in 10 minutes?" Yeah. You kind of have to put your hand up and say, "My bad." It's hard. Yeah. But you know, the team understand, and it's, you know, the pressure's on. I do like to play tricks sometimes, and so sometimes I have gone like I'll mold something, and like a collectible or a maquette, you mold it, and then when you open up the mold, the sculpture's ruined and it's all broken and stuff. I'll go up to it and I'll sort of piece it back together, and I'll walk up to the sculptor's table and I'm like, "Hey bro, just before I'm whoa," and I'll slip and just throw it on the floor, and it falls to pieces. I'm like, oh, and then they look at me like they go white, and I'm like, "Nah." Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Pranks keep the pressure down, you know.
So who did you get? Do you want to rat somebody out and say who you've pulled that prank on and like gotten them really good?
I got Jamie Best Warwick. Okay. I got pretty bad. Bill Hunt. Bill Hunt was also a sculptor. Yeah, but Bill, man, Bill used to get pretty pranky. And then Dave Meng, who's a sculptor who he sculpted a lot on, I think it might have been Narnia, or at least on I used to do it to him all the time because he's so straight-faced. Yeah. Nothing ever seemed to faze him, and so I kept trying to get him. And I think one time he was like, like, "Yes!"
Now, you mentioned that Bill likes to prank you. What's some... Is there a prank that comes to mind where someone got you really good?
I remember once he sprayed fart gas on a phone, and then kept getting reception to call me because we only had one phone in the mold room. Okay, and so I would always answer it, and I kept answering, "Hello." So is Luke there? And I'm like, "Yeah." Sorry. And anyway, I hung up, and then they ring again. I'm like, "What did you want?" I'm like, "Oh, like that." And then I turned it up, and I kept smelling it. And I was like, "What's this smell?" And I'm like, anyway, I hung it up again, and the plaster trap in the mold room gets really, really stinky after a while, because it's like it sort of starts rotting. You have to clean it out. And I kept answering the phone, going, "Man, why do I smell the plaster trap? I was cleaning it yesterday." Like that. And then at one point, I answered the phone, and I was like, "This is the most the phone's ever rung." And then as I turned around, I saw Bill like hiding around the sculpting room, laughing at me. And I'm like, ran after him. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I always like to ask this of people, you know, who are involved in Lord of the Rings. When did you get a sense of the fact that it would be a huge hit?
It's an interesting question, because I think I've tried to recount it, and I think it was two instances. Okay. One of them, I mean, probably the first one was when I turned up and at Wētā. Yeah. And I got shown around the building, and you've been there, so you know how much of a rabbit warren it is. But when I turned up, it was even worse, because there wasn't clear signage, and then they just extended it. And so there were like weird little tunnels and kind of like crazy little little alcoves you had to go through.
It's very impressive, actually, how, you know, the how confusing it can be to get around in there.
You often will walk into an area and see someone just going, and you're like, "Are you lost?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, it's my second day." And you're like, "Yeah, where do you want to go?" But yeah, when I turned up and was being shown around and shown the different things that were being on and kind of did a little bit of a tour, I just was staggered. It was like going into Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. Like, it was just like, okay, so here's where we're making the prosthetics and the creatures, and over here's the blacksmith making the swords, and there we're making the big miniatures, and over here's the robotics for the big rig, and I'm just like, where the hell did all this come from? And then I remember looking up at one point, and it was might have been Minas Morgul. Minas Morgul, I think. I can't remember which bigature it was.
Yeah.
And I just looked at it, and I'm like, this is just insane, the size of this, and the scale of what we were working on. And I remember thinking that these films are, and I mean, because I was so fresh, though, I just thought, oh, every film must be like this, ignorantly not knowing that, it wasn't like that at all. And then I got into working, and it was really great. And then there was a point on, I think it was the Rohan charge that we were shooting. I can't remember where we shot that. It might have been here down south somewhere. And they did the Rohan charge, and it was 200 plus people screaming and charging in full battle gear across the plains, and it was just, I got chills just as I told you the story. Yeah, it was unbelievable, the level of just I mean, epicness that doesn't even begin to describe.
Right.
And you could just feel palpable what it was. We also got to see the rushes. That's right. Also the rushes. So remember the first rushes we saw was and the first thing I think they shot was the getting off the road with the Black Rider. And there was the scene where the Black Rider was and Frodo was like, get off the road, and they jumped down, and then just seeing even just motions of that with the rider on horseback running through the forest. Yeah, it was. I just was watching this, going, this is just mesmerizing, and it's just rushes. But the time I knew when it was when I was watching Fellowship of the Ring. The first time I sat in the cinema. Yeah, when with the cast and the crew, and the lights went down, and you heard the sound and Galadriel's voice. Galadriel, yep. Oh man. And then we saw all the battles with the VFX on it, because we'd just seen it, with blue screens and stuff in the background, and we might have seen. We saw that cave troll edit that went to Cannes as well. Yeah, yeah, that was pretty. That was cool. Like I was like, man, that was cool. Wow, that was awesome. That just came out on like the most recent 4K set. They had that as a special feature. Was the Cannes reel? Yeah, and so. Yeah. I've heard so many people over the years say, "Oh, when I saw that reel at Cannes, that's when I knew." And for years, I was like, "What the heck was on that thing?" So yeah, it's on the bonus feature of the most recent 4K release. Oh, so, wow! Yeah, so fans have seen it now. Oh, okay, great. Because we saw that, and I remember thinking, "Man, this could be really, really good." But I wasn't like, we weren't 100% sold, right? But then when I sat in the cinema. Oh man, shit! The credits started rolling, and I was just awestruck. Yeah, but the thing is, I was there for so much of it. Yeah, and that's the thing, is that even now, like on the shows that I'm doing at the moment, we do all this stuff, we do all this prep, we do all this, getting ready. Until you put a camera on, until you put a lens on it, it never looks the same. And I think that's the thing, is we were looking at the video split on Rings. Can you see the zip? Is that teeth in straight? Why is that guy's helmet on sideways? Like, that's what we were looking for. And so you're a bit laser focused on shot by shot. But then seeing it all collectively was just, yeah. And it was in the Embassy Theatre that I saw it, at the cast and crew. And I remember thinking, wow, that movie was amazing. Obviously, never in a million years thought it would be as big as something like Star Wars or those films. But now it sounds like it is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I've been kind of entertained recently, when I'm watching, whether it's on YouTube or on, some kind of film commentary, how often, when people talk about greatest films of all time, it's not uncommon for Lord of the Rings to actually come up sooner than like Star Wars. It's
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Someone was talking about, I've heard a few people talking about, the Andy Serkis, Planet of the Apes trilogy, where he's the main character, and how it's a sneaky great trilogy that doesn't get the appreciation it deserves for how great it is. And that for whatever reason, like Lord of the Rings comes up. Maybe it's because of the Andy connection, I don't know. But yeah, when they talk about like greatest trilogies of the last 20 plus years, Lord of the Rings is always the number one there. Now, how soon before it came out in theaters did you guys see it as a cast and crew? Do you remember?
I think it was, because I think it premiered in London, if I'm not mistaken, the first one. I think it was London.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Maybe New York, LA, I can't remember. And then it was Wellington.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that a lineup? London, New York, Wellington. But I think we saw it and we thought, oh my God, these films, this is amazing. Fellowship of the Rings, an amazing film. Oh my God. Yeah. I did walk away slightly disappointed because we'd worked so much on the orcs and the Uruk-hai, and we hadn't seen the Helm's Deep. And that we were like, man, that film was great. It was awesome. Words was cool. And, the whole Weathertop and the goblins and the Mines of Moria. Where's all the other stuff we made? Yeah.
You're like, you have to wait another year for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, and a whole bunch of pickups as well. But I think we knew after walking away that we're like, okay, this is probably going to be good. And we were always worried. We had a bunch of Kiwis and a bunch of Australians, and then a smattering of influential English and American, and also European technicians and artists. Mm-hmm. And so we were a little bit worried that people would, we often used to say, people would say, oh, good on you, Kiwis. You gave it a go. You gave it your best shot, but it's not quite Hollywood. We were always really worried about that. And we always also talked about, Oscars. And everyone went, don't talk about Oscars, man. That's never going to happen. They're just going to, as long as people enjoy the movie. And I think when we got nominated, obviously we saw the response from the fans. Right. But from our peers to get nominated, especially for best makeup and best costume, it was just like, whoa. Yeah. Okay. we're like Richard, and the team and everyone and Peter and all of us punching above our weight. It was that was like, wow. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Man, that's great. Punching above your weight is a great way. That's a great illustration for that specific time. I think you guys caught a lot of people off guard in the industry with that, especially with that first film. Now, because you're so into, the behind the scenes, and props and prosthetics and everything. Did you find it was Fellowship and Lord of the Rings unique in you being able to just take in the final product, or is that kind of usual for you? Like, do you watch a film, differently, one that you've been involved in with one that you haven't? Do you see the seams? Do you see like, oh yeah, like that jogs my memory of this thing? And like, what I'm curious is like, is there, movies that you're involved in that are just so good that you just get swept up in it and all the other stuff kind of fades away?
It does actually. And I think some of the films that I've worked on that usually if my part in it and the creature I'm doing or the performance that I'm doing, if I don't, obviously the first time I watch it, I'm like, I go on a roller coaster going, oh, is it going to be good? Is it going to be crap? But then when I see it and I'm like, I'm like, oh, it was crap. It's my first response to my part of it. But then I'll kind of go watch it again and be like, oh, okay, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. And then I get distance and I can be like, okay, it's fine. But I think the thing is that when I watch a film like Lord of the Rings, the first time I'm watching it, I'll go, oh, that was there. And then my brain keeps getting clicked back into the story. Yeah. Oh, that's this bit. Click back into the story. And I think the more times, and so I know it's a good film when I'm mostly being engaged in the story and the film. It's a good film.
Yeah.
And then even if I am kind of remembering where we shot it and how we shot it and what we did, subsequent watches of the good films that I've been involved with, I start forgetting. It's like a compartmentalization where I remember the shooting of it, and then I see the footage, or I see the movie and the story, and they disassociate, which is really
interesting.
Because when I still watch the prologue scene with the elves and the armies and the orcs coming through, and the Numenorians getting ready to wage war, a lot of it's shot in Mount Ruapehu, in the middle of the North Island, on the slopes of Mount Doom. And there were some great times I remember where we were shooting the prologue at the same time that they were shooting Sam and Frodo.
Frodo and Sam,
to throw the ring in, and so there was this great kind of back and different scales, and it was like now we're Hobbit scale, now we're big Sauron, and it was crazy. But I watched those sequences and I'm like, now they're amazing. But then I also remember that a lot of the action sequences with the guys marching up, we drove all the way up to Ruapehu, the massive mountain, and then the storm cloud just comes in. And we can't shoot on the mountain, and so we have to go into the car park and put up a big blue screen and shoot a lot of the prologue sequences in this massively beautiful expanse on a blue screen in a car park, and so every now and then when I'm watching the prologue, I'll be like, that was in a car park. But it's very fleeting if the films are good. Like Blade Runner 2049, I had a very small part to play in the miniatures and helping there. But man, I watched that movie and it just
sucks you in.
Nothing of what we did in there. All I just see is the beauty and also rings. Apart from the trees at Isengard, I always remember that night because it was the first night I was ever on a big movie set. It was the first night I was ever in a creature suit on a big movie set. And so I kind of the Isengard trees falling is listed in my memory as turning up and being like first day on a massive film set. It was amazing.
So I was curious, how did you came presumably to Wētā for working on sculptures and prosthetics. So at what point did you get stuck into suits? Like, when did that start?
It's interesting. I don't know whether Ben precursored Richard or the team to let them know, but I ended up being the shop guinea pig and the shop average man all the time. Because I was the young intern or whatever. And so I was constantly I was a very good body double for Elijah Wood. So me and Elijah, same age actually. But also similar size. I'm a bit bigger than him now. But he so when he gets stabbed at Weathertop, they took a cast of my shoulder to create the wound and also the protective thing. When he gets his finger cut off by Gollum, bitten off by Gollum, that's my. He wasn't available, and so they used my hand and my fingers to do all the tests, and that I think so that bit of trivia there, and so
nice.
I was very much I was used for different molds for like some of the urukai, the birthing urukai and stuff, and so I very much got into being put in difficult situations and life casts and things like that, or test this out. And so then when I did it a bit more. I think my brother had mentioned that I was a performer as well. And so the trees at Isengard, Richard was like, oh, well, let's chuck you in an orc mask. And so we had this animatronic screamer orc mask that me and my brother wore, which is the first time I was a creature on set. It didn't make it to the film, I don't think, or the extras or anything like that. But yeah, it was cool. I remember there was a big tree falling. And it's like, there's a big tree falling, and then you're gonna when the tree falls, I want you to run around the light stand and then jump over and da-da-da. You cool to do that? And I just went, what tree? So I couldn't see anything. And so they had a catcher. They'd go tree, and then they'd be like, and someone would push me, and then I'd run into frame and then jump over, kind of get it, and then someone would literally catch me on the other side of frame.
Wow. But
yeah, so that was when the performance stuff started. And then after Rings, after we finished that, I did a couple of music videos actually. And on those music videos, I did creatures and I did prosthetics, and so, you know, there's one actually by bit of trivia for you. I'll see if I can get you the link. But Andrew Durno, who was one of the guys who worked on the original Sauron armor, he's also he's been in the workshop for years, as I have. He had a band called Head Like a Hole, and a group of us made a homage to Bad Taste.
Interesting.
Sorry, to Brain Dead.
Music
video, and there's zombies and chainsaws and and I did the prosthetics, but also was one of the kind of figured out the stunts for it as well. So yeah, that kind of was going on all the time, and then I took a break actually in 2005 after King Kong and Narnia, because it was very full on. And started acting and went back into it, and then so I'd go away, and then Richard kept calling me back to say, hey, do you want to jump in this suit? Hey, do you want to do in this suit? And so he kept kind of pushing me to be a creature performer whilst I was trying to get my acting career going as well. Yeah, and now, you know, obviously we've seen you in quite a few creatures here recently. The most recent here in theaters, at least, has been your Baby Kong, as he is lovingly called in Godzilla X Kong, which did really well at the box office. It overperformed the expectations. So what can you tell us about Baby Kong? Well, it's cool because I've done a lot of motion capture at Wētā Effects over the years. And you know, a few Planet of the Apes shows, and bits and pieces. And then I was at just an industry party. And they turned to me and said, "Oh, hey, a friend from Wētā Effects is like, oh, so getting ready for you know, because I was being asked for my availability, and we're getting ready for this next project coming up." I'm like, "Oh, what's that?" And they're like, "Oh, it's going to be a big one. You're going to need your acting and your performance and your creature skills." And I'm like, "Oh, cool." And then I remember turning up, and usually when I'm doing motion capture as a stunt performer, or as a movement person, or we're doing lots of stuff, every now and then they might put the performance capture camera on. But I turned up on day one for this, and they just were like, "There's me and Alan Henry's helmets. There's the cameras," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, I guess like, okay, cool." And then I got the brief, and it's like, yeah, we've got King Kong versus Godzilla, and there's this character in it who's like a little, they call him the punk sort of sidekick, and they were like, "We're going to get you to play the little monkeys." Suko is what
Suko, that's right.
Or son of Kong. But yeah, I think Mini Kong's cool. Baby Kong. Is it Baby Kong?
Yeah, that's what. Well, I think that's what a lot of people were calling it when he popped up in the trailer. Was Baby Kong, but Suko. Both good.
And he was so much fun to play because he's like the little runt of the litter. But he's also a cheeky little guy. He's so like, especially when he comes out, you know, the first thing, and you know, there's that loving bit between him and Kong with a finger, and he's all wide-eyed, and then just goes. It's like we say he's such a little shit, cheeky little shit. He was super fun, but also he was there was some scenes like where he's running away after the snake, the serpent. And then he's like swinging between trees, and that's me doing that. And although like it was lots of it. Obviously, what we do is performance capture and motion capture, and then there's a big team that take all the information and the performance side of it, and they change it. You know, they make the gravity work. They you know, I had to do a stumble there, and a lot of things like the fight between Scar King and Kong. That's Alan and myself doing the dramatic beats, but he kind of played Kong and Scar King. So if it's because he's got such a great body length for the Scar King kind of stuff, and his Kong's really, really good as well. But then a few of us, like a friend of mine, Luke Hanna and Sean Sepoy and Ike Hammond, we'd switch in, and so that fight actually has about 5 or 6 people at different points in it. And so the animators stitch it all together and you know, and kind of make it look fluid. But a lot of what you see that Suko's doing when he's running through the jungle and falling and swinging, I did that. And it was it was hard work. There was a take I did once, 11 takes of him running up something. and yeah, 11 takes was man,
Pretty
because
brutal.
it was like a 5 meter platform. I don't know what that is in feet, but basically it was like platform with arm extensions on and running up and having to turn, and and then there was the swinging one where he's kind of doing a bit of parkour, and I did quite a few takes of that as well, and it just, your body slammed after it.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's really good, challenging, fun, that stuff, especially while trying to keep the performance side of it as well.
Right. Yeah.
Which is why people like Andy Serkis is so amazing.
Yeah.
Because I did it for a support character in one film, and I was like, oh, it's really hard. Whereas Andy's been doing it for years, and he's just unbelievable. And people like Terry Notary as well, who are just next level. And so the respect only ever grows the more I do it.
Yeah, man. Now we mentioned Andy's Planet of the Apes trilogy, and you are in the upcoming Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes that is coming out very soon. As we're recording this, we're only about 10 days away from that dropping in theaters.
Wow.
So what can you tell us about your participation in that film?
So in that film, it was as I mentioned earlier, I was a monkey.
Yeah.
But also many monkeys.
There's a lot of those.
Yeah. So and chimps. We shouldn't call them monkeys. They're
right.
Chimps. So I was coming off the back of Godzilla X Kong.
Yeah. You were already in the right mind frame. Like
yeah. It was like, oh, okay, it's the year of the monkey.
Right.
and so yeah, the same team that I mentioned before, we got in and at Wētā Workshop, and obviously they'd shot in Australia, and a lot of it is mocap on the set, but then they are also, a lot of it's done back in Wellington on the mocap stage, and so yeah, we're doing drama beats. We're doing kind of filling out all of the background, but then also doing a lot of the stunt stuff. Because a lot of the stunt stuff that's done on set is in what we call faux-cap suits, which are the grey ones with the checkers, and they don't have the markers.
Okay.
And they're really they don't have the dots. They're really there to give us the team at Wētā the scene and give them the camera moves and plot it out, and then we go in and we'll do the mocap over the top of it.
Gotcha.
Which is great challenging, because you're on set, you really have it's much more theatrical when you're on set, because you feel the scene and you hit the beats and you kind of do the choreography. Whereas when you're doing it on in a performance capture stage, the shots are locked, the timing's locked, the headlooks are locked, and so you have to try and keep it natural, but you're kind of in a bit of a set kind of roller coaster of look up and turn and breathe and then move off. Yeah, and that choreography of movement. It's great that they can't see, because a lot of the time we'll have monitors set up, and so you can see the reference plate and then shift to the next reference plate so that you get the timing right. But yeah, that was really fun, and got to do some cool sort of stunt stuff on that. But a lot of what was captured was the actors, and so then there was a pickup session that was done after the shooting in Australia. They did a 2-week pickup shoot in Wellington. And I was lucky enough to be asked to be the movement coach for the Wellington pickups at Wētā Workshop, which was nice. Which was cool to be, I guess, not really rubbing shoulders with Andy and Terry, because they're but Terry Notary is a man I respect very, very much, and so to even be sort of in the same ballpark as him was really quite cool, and lovely cast. Really cool cast, and I do think the film is going to be pretty good. Actually,
it looks pretty darn cool. Good. Yeah. I'm pretty pumped for that one. I think it looks legit. I've enjoyed all those. I just got my kids into the Planet of the Apes movies, and my 13-year-old is like obsessed with the new trilogy now, and I'm like, buddy, there's a new one in 10 days. Like, so he's all pumped. Now what is that move like to movement coach? What does a movement coach do? What kind of things do you yell out at your pupils?
Be better. No, no, no. Movement coaching is something that I've moved into more. I've always done it a little bit, like if people needed help, other actors who I've been working with, or if I've been on the stunt crew to kind of assist people to looking more like the character and feeling it. And it comes from the work that I've done over the years of feeling about, for me, the three main things, which is like strength, breath, and weight. Those three things really inform a creature or a performance or a movement. And so what I'm basically doing is trying to use my experience and trying to break it down into digestible sort of chunks, so that you can, like I was doing it just last night with a really lovely stunt performer who hadn't had the prep that everyone else had. And so there are things that I'll start working with them, and I'll say, you might want to roll your shoulders and then have a deep breath, and then just trying to figure out what makes that person click as to what their body's doing and what their mind is doing to make that happen. And so just finding little tricks. It's usually to do with a bit of imagination. It's all to do with posture, where you're holding tension, and it's kind of like basically building a model kit or a Lego set with that person. Little key things will help them. But yeah, I really love it because I'm a movement nerd.
Yeah.
and it's really interesting to see what people bring and how people think. And I like finding things that like, oh, that really works for that person.
Yeah.
But for people like for a show like Planet of the Apes, the movement coach who was on set, Australia, did a whole bunch of work. Yeah. And so my job was to come in and just sort of remind them and help them and say to them, so what were you doing on set and what helped you? And then also little tricks to say, hey, I noticed you're doing this and you're this, and sometimes it's figuring things out, like I've got to go, the character might need to go jump and grab, and you just things like, okay, where's your foot going to go, turn it on the right, and and also one of the main things is actually looking at the video split and making sure that what they're doing is matching what the kind of, because the director will often, or the other crew will be like, oh, something doesn't look right, or it looks a bit, and you have to kind of look at the video split, think about what it needs to look like, and then sort of translate that into the performer. It's quite challenging. It's really cool. And I've just in the last couple of years actually had a string of them. I'm an actor on the show I'm at the moment, but I'm also the movement coach, and then I've been a movement coach for a universe and a franchise that I'm very much in love with. So that was I don't know if I can talk about it yet. Okay. But it is. I was very 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 chuffed to be asked to help out setting up a creature. But yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll stay tuned for that one for sure. And I think you've given me an idea for, the next time I go down to New Zealand. I think a great video idea is if you teach me how to move like an orc or an ape. I think there would be some entertainment value there. Well, I'll say it like that. I think people would enjoy laughing at that.
I'm sure you'll do great. Well, see, the bad thing about that though is if the good thing is if you do look good and you win, I look good.
That's true.
And so do you. Yeah. But if you look bad and you can't do it, then I'm not a very good movement coach.
Oh, see? Oh man. See, now that would really put pressure on me because I'd want you to look good. But I would totally blame it. It would be myself. It would be I would be the problem. Now, we've talked a couple times about, Wētā being involved in the collectibles biz. And I just happen to have this little guy right here. And it's got on the bottom right there's your signature and name. Tell us about this guy, this epic Sauron mini statue.
Yes. So every now and then I get a bit of a break between working on performance stuff or working at making creatures and stuff for films. And that, not to say that I'm super prolific and it's just that I'm balancing two jobs, my family, and also Wētā Workshop makes so many cool things all the time. And so I'm really, really busy making movies. But if there is a bit of a lull, Jules German will come and say, hey man, do you want to make something? And I'm like, yeah. And that was one that he came thick and fast. He was like,
Yeah.
so we've got the Sauron that Fabio sculpted, the big one.
Yeah.
Recently, and then he's like, we want to do a mini one, and we want to do it with the forging of the ring from the prologue. And I was like, yeah, man, that sounds awesome. And so yeah, they came up with a concept, and it's a very quick sketch, and it literally is that scene from the prologue.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I took Fabio's armor, which he'd sort of set up in the digital space, it was a digital sculpture. I took the armor that he had done, and then I basically had to, because it's scaled down in completely different position, I had to pretty much sort of take it, move it around, and then scale up the texture. But his what he set up was amazing.
Yeah.
And then the biggest thing was the pose. Was trying to get the pose right, because it's such a it's the iconic, with the flames rising.
Oh yeah, the flames shoot up on screen. Yeah.
Yeah, and my mate Sala Baker did that shoot, and it was I was like, I need to. There's this very fine balance when you're doing sculptures like that, where you want to do what's in the show, what's in the film, but you also want it to look kind of the intent of it. And if I did the exact body position and the thing that Sala did, it could have be a little bit lackluster, because he's playing to the camera and I'm trying to make this play to the whole thing.
Yeah, it's got to work 3D. Yeah,
3D. Yeah, and so I pushed it a little more and kind of put his back shoulder down a bit. And Richard said a bit more flamboyant, which I'm not sure is what Sauron was going for. But
well, yeah, I mean, but it works. It works. When this thing spins on. On the beauty shots of it, it looks pretty amazing.
Yeah, thanks, man. And the cape took me a long time.
Oh, so yeah.
I messed around, and I usually take photos of myself in the position and then we'll pose it. But the cape, because there's three, it's quite technically difficult, because there's three kind of ruffles,
layers to it.
Yeah. But then when I do it, you can't make it too thin, because it will end up the molds will end up basically being too thin and break. You also can't make it too fat, because then it looks wrong. So there's a really big balance between that. But yeah, great art direction from people like Dan and Jules and Richard.
And I didn't realize until you just pointed out that there was 3 layers to his cape. That's awesome. Now, another detail that I love about this, and I've posted about this before, but in case you guys haven't seen over on Instagram where I shared this, Sauron has a dagger here that, if you look closely, he does have in the prologue sequence, in that iconic shot. And there's a pretty cool story behind that, isn't there, Luke?
Yes, there is. The story is that there was a sequence that is not in the final film, where he got the dagger and he stabs his hand and then cuts it and then pours it into the ring. And kind of his blood melds with the ring, and then you see him. He's still got the bloody dagger in his backhand as he's raising his ultimate creation. Yeah, which is, I
think there is storyboards. There's storyboards in like the art book. I think in one of the in the Fellowship art book. But yeah, so he's got this pool of blood and gold, molten gold in the palm of his hand, and it forms into the ring, which is awesome.
It is awesome,
so
yeah. And I mean, they talked about shooting it, and I wasn't there on the day they shot that sequence, but I'm pretty sure they would have. There'll be some negative somewhere where you'd see, like that, which would be lovely.
Oh yes, that 25th anniversary 4K Blu-ray is what I'm hoping for. I keep mentioning it every chance I get. I mentioned it to Philippa. I mentioned it to Richard. I think I'm just going to mention every time one of you guys is on here. I'm just going to say 25th anniversary in case anybody's watching. Put it on there.
Yeah.
Now you had a little debate. You were telling me when I was down in New Zealand, you had a little debate with Daniel Falconer about a very small detail on this.
Yes.
What was that?
Well, the whole thing is like, because we pour over the photos.
Yeah.
We've got original photos from set, like Polaroids, and that we use. We use the grey matter upstairs a lot, but it's getting a bit old and long in the tooth. But yeah, I looked at it because it's a different suit to the one that's in the prologue.
Mm-hmm.
This was a Sauron suit, was remade for Sala for that forging of the ring. So there's a few differences between seeing him in the Last Alliance of Elves and Men and then seeing him in the ring forming scene. But so the cape was one of the big ones.
Yeah.
But also the chainmail at the front.
Yes.
So the chainmail at the front, in the prologue, he's got one little bit of chainmail, but in this one, in this scene, he's got the layers of chainmail in the front around his codpiece.
Yeah.
Now, I'd always remembered and I'd always seen that there were 3 layers of chainmail with the triangles, and then off to the side of each of them, on one side there's a little bit of chainmail, and on the other side there wasn't. I remember it being asymmetrical.
Off center. Yeah.
Off center. So it was one little bit of chainmail right at the top near his belt, and then there was nothing on the other side. And that's what I did, because I saw it, and I remember the references, they're good references, but they're still Polaroids from 20 years ago. Yeah. And so I was going, yeah, that's right. And so I put it in, and I sent it off to print, and they printed it and they painted it, and yeah, okay, sweet, we're all happy. And then Jules sends me this email saying, oh, Dan's informed me you've made a mistake, and I'm like, what? Made a mistake? Well, obviously, I do that all the time, but, I was like, really? Oh, okay, what's the mistake? And it's like, oh, you've left a bit of chainmail off the side. I'm like, nah. Hold my beer. No. I know that it's like this. And I looked at the reference, and then I was looking at the reference, and I'm going, I'm sure it's like that. And then Dan's like, oh, I don't know. And then and we had this big back and forth between me, Dan, and Jules, where I'm like, I'm sure it was like that. And then, sure enough, there was a bit of reference that was found, and I was wrong. I imagined that it was only on one side. I don't know. I just read it, and in my head, I probably saw the first bit of reference.
Yeah.
And then, like, I don't know, total recalled my memory to go, yeah, it was always only on one side.
Now, to be fair, out remembering something about Lord of the Rings against Daniel Falconer is a pretty tall order.
I don't think it's ever going to happen, man.
I was going to say, it wouldn't surprise me if nobody has done it, because it's like, yeah, I think it's higher than stumping Stephen Colbert at trivia.
Yeah.
I think like Dan says, he's told me a couple times, he knows where the bones are buried or the skeletons are buried. And that's why they keep him around Wētā, because he knows where all this stuff is,
He does. And often people will say, like, I'll get rushed into something for collectibles or something like, hey, Luke, do you remember what happened like this? We've talked to Greg Tozer, we've talked to Jamie Viswarek, and I'm like, and in my head I'm like, and I'm just like, go find Dan.
Go ask Dan.
Go. Why are you talking to Dan? Why are you talking to me? Talk to Dan. He is all things Tolkien, and he's all things Lord of the Rings. I think the other thing is that he hasn't been hit in the head as much as I have, so I've got an excuse.
Now, have you ever tried to talk him into getting, get Dan? I think you should get Dan. Get him in an orc costume sometime. Yeah, why not? Why not?
I think he did an elf at one point. I think he might have performed. I mean, Matt Appleton. He was a costumer. He's in there. He's in the Council of Elrond. I think he has an actual named character.
Wow.
I'll have to find that one for you as well. Matt Appleton. He was one of the main costumers for Wētā on Hobbit and
cool. Yeah.
Lord of the Rings, and he even worked on Rings of Power as well.
Yeah.
What do they call a sevener or something? Is what some people.
A sevener.
Or is it a sixer or something?
Oh, because all the films and the show. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which I'm unfortunately not going to be a 7.5 because or whatever the next season of Rings of Power.
Oh because they moved to.
They moved to the UK.
Yeah, they moved to UK. Yeah.
But I mean, that's where Tolkien's from. So
Yeah.
Maybe the heir.
You might. Who knows? You might have a chance. there's rumors that Warner Brothers is looking at making more films and stuff. There's agreements in place for that. We don't know, or at least I don't know. Maybe you do, but I don't know any of what they're making. But I mean, there's something special about New Zealand, I have to say. After, I always suspected being down there, that only solidified it in my mind that it's a great place, and I'd love to see more films being made down there in Middle Earth.
Yeah, I'd love to work on another. I mean, I love the universe. It's so, and it feels ingrained in my ethos and my being. Like, my kids are Rings babies.
Yeah.
Without Lord of the Rings, they wouldn't be here. So,
you're right.
It is our world and our universe, and we call Wellington Middle Earth a lot of times. So people when you're outside, when you're overseas, you'll say, "Oh, Middle Earth," sometimes referring to New Zealand.
Yeah.
And also, you'll say, "Oh, down in Middle Earth," and you might be referring to Wellington because that's where the heart of it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I haven't heard anything yet about those films. But well,
they'll need movement coaches, and they'll need people to get beat up and tossed around for sure.
Yes, and also hairy feet.
Yeah, feet. And they'll need hairy feet.
Yeah.
And orcs and all kinds of creatures. Now we kind of glossed over a little bit. We ended up doing quite a time jump there, but obviously, you were a sevener, or whatever the phrase is.
I think it's a sevener.
A sevener. I think that sounds right. If my math is right, it's not always, but obviously, 3 of those are the Hobbit films. So what kind of stuff did you do on that? Were you doing kind of double duty on that as well, where you were getting tossed around and also, working in the workshop?
Yeah, actually, the Hobbit, I think, was the first kind of series of films or like films that I did where I was very much bouncing on either side. So 2005, I took a mini break, as I said, and went away and did acting and theatre, back into theatre and that whole world. And then when the Hobbit came around, my wife and I were pregnant with my daughter, and so my wife and I weren't pregnant. My wife was pregnant, and I was there for moral support. But yeah, and so the Hobbit came along, and so I was like, well, my wife, who was working at Wētā, can't work at Wētā, working after a baby, and so I left the acting gig for a while. I basically just said I'm going to be working full time, and went into Hobbit and started making Hobbit feet. Also dwarf hands, dwarf faces, more orcs, and so it was an interesting take up, because we had so long. When I started on Lord of the Rings back in '99, they'd already been doing years of pre-production, and I started a couple of weeks before principal photography started. So there was a lot of like pre-stuff, and there was a whole bunch of stuff that was already built. The Hobbit was catch up, and I know this has all been talked about in all the interviews and stuff. The Hobbit was catch up from day one, with the whole shifting, and also it was a very different time. I think we just came off Avatar, well, not just, but that was the last big show that we'd had down here, and so there was a change of now. We felt like an arm of Hollywood, whereas before we were kind of had something to prove. Now it's like, okay, we've done a few shows down here now, we've got the crew all going. And so it was very much feeling like a studio sort of town. Yeah. But yeah, it was just so hard, just the time frame. And it can't really be stressed enough. I mean, I was doing, the hours that we were doing at the workshop were just insane. The amount of weapons that we needed to create, and it was just constantly, you never got a time to get a breath. And neither did Peter, neither did the shooting crew, because it was relentless. But at the same time, it was fun. There was some cool stuff, and it was great to get the gang back together. Many 100 of us had worked on the originals, but it was quite different as well, because before we had a couple of hobbits, and then we had orcs and humans and stuff. Like having one hobbit and then 12, 13, 14, 200 dwarves was really quite different. and a lot more pressure on the prosthetics team to just consistently make stuff. There wasn't as many new characters. There was just the same characters every day wearing prosthetics, which was really difficult. But then also the digital side of stuff really was starting to come in then.
Right.
We did a lot of the armor, especially the dwarven stuff, being so geometric and being so symmetrical.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff was done on the computer.
And
milled, and then and also for time, because back in the day, fashion the armor, weld it, put it together, detail it, mold it, cut it. It was no time.
Right.
So it was model it 3D, mill it, mold, mold it, and then start making the casts. But
with the tighter timeline, I don't know how you could have done it, the other way.
I don't know.
It would have been a pretty tall order, I think.
Yeah, I don't think we could have done it the other way. And there's some beautiful work on there, especially with so much of the dwarf stuff.
Yeah.
And all the work. And, the other thing that was coming up very much was also Wētā effects after doing the motion capture and doing the all the battle scenes and stuff. And from my now performance kind of stuff that I've been doing around New Zealand, I got called up, and so was on the stage at Wētā Effects when I wasn't looking after kids, or making dwarves. I was being dwarves and specifically goblins. We did the goblins, the whole chase sequence with the VFX, and that was weeks of running. And Terry Notary, who was a movement kind of coach on that, he's the fittest man alive, and he was showing us how to run like the goblins, and they've got this whole kind of thing where they're constantly like fighting a rat on their back, and they look and they like usually a creature will look and then move, whereas the goblins are just look like constantly like following, like they're just crazy erratic. But there was this run that they did where a quadruped run. And usually, if you're quadruped running, you're either kind of running like a spider or a dog, or like an ape, where you're going foot, arm, leg, foot, arm, leg, foot, arm, leg, stuff like that. But these ones, Terry wanted us to do same arm, same leg.
Oh.
So instead of going opposite, you're going, the same. And
that's got to be weird.
Weird and really hard, because your core on each side is the only thing you're balancing with. But also, if you make one minor mistake, you just like that. And so you're doing mocap and you're running across the stage, and then one of us will just go almost every take. One of us will just be like, but yeah, it was cool, and it was cool to kind of to see all arms of it, to be like, making the props, going on set. And seeing them being used, and then performing in the and the Hobbit motion capture VFX was also relentless and strong, because it was just like a speed train.
So how do you split your time? When you're doing double duty like that and being a mocap, or does one naturally come after the other, or are you just constantly kind of ping ponging between buildings there at Wētā?
Pretty much ping-ponging.
Okay.
And there was a stage, like 2010 onwards was when I was now working at Wētā Effects a lot more, and also back at Wētā Workshop. But Richard and the team really supportive of my want for performance, but also they gain stuff from it as well. If ever they've got a creature that they're building, they'll be like, well, let's dust off the old grey hairs from Mr. Walker and get him to come and chat to you about performances and creatures, and so there's a kind of a really good, and there's a lot of connections like with like stunt coordinators and other creature performers that I bring, and that it's kind of a little collective, and so it's a very symbiotic relationship that we have there, but mostly just the generosity of the team at Wētā who just they like seeing their mates do well, as we all do. And so Richard and the team they're like, there were times there where I had to kind of push away a bit of performance stuff, just with things like when I was doing like the Power Rangers, suit build, and I was a supervisor for a while, and then an Iron Mother, which was interesting. I'm like, well, I can't do any performance during this stretch, with Iron Mother, because the suit build's so hard until I got cast as a robot. So I did both of them. But yeah, it is a juggle, and it's a constant kind of balance. But the best way I've dealt with it is just being open with both parties. Usually I have the ability now, because I'm working in 3D, I can work from home quite a bit. And so I'll perform on set, and then I'll go at home at night, 3D model for props and costumes. But when I'm not busy, I'm doing my own 3D modeling for art's sake. Anyway,
Now, and then we talked a pretty good amount, a couple of years ago. Like we said, we did the stream with you and Jed and Phil and Robert, talking about the orcs in Rings of Power. So what was it like, getting that call, after 2 trilogies, and then you get to come and be an orc again?
That was kind of crazy, because it was such a long, slow build up. Because we'd been talking about the Rings of Power TV series for a long time at Wētā, and I think I got made up as an orc once, and Jeff Bezos came around, and I like to be a little bit willfully ignorant about certain things in the world, because I just I try to stay positive. But not that I've got anything against Jeff Bezos. It's just that I didn't know who the hell he was. so someone was like, oh, we need to make you up as an orc, because there's this guy coming around who's potentially going to be making a TV series, Lord of the Rings. I'm like, oh, okay, sweet. So I got made up as an orc, and I was getting all up in his face and, hey, how's it going, mate? Gotta give us your money. Being my classic bad self. And then he left, and apparently everyone's like the production staff were a little bit like, those jokes you were saying were kind of bit inappropriate. I'm like, what? And they're like, but he's the guy with the money, right? And they're like, right, he's a billionaire. And I'm like,
so he's got a lot of it.
He's got a lot of money. I should have pushed it even more. But he was funny. He was laughing. And that's the thing is that I don't know. I do like to kind of push the line of a little bit risque, and that's humor. Like you get taught that in drama school is that the taboos and breaking of the lines of what's PC is where the humor is. But yeah, so that happened, and apparently he walked away from it going, wow, because he obviously looked at the facilities at Wētā and the team and all that. Right. Yeah. But seeing an orc close up, he just said, I can't see how that's not real. That's just like a real creature. And so he was quite flabbergasted with all the amazing work that we'd have done over the years in the team. And so then they started gearing up for it, and it was like, as I said, a slow build, because we'd heard that was like maybe 2 years before the even project came to us. And then when it started coming in, it was like, okay, no, we're going here, and it was a long journey to kind of reimagine, because there's, talking quite frankly, there's issues to do with IP, because it's obviously it's a Tolkien IP, but we can't just copy what we did on the other things, because it's a completely different financier. It's a different company. Line, and so we had to do it, but then also make sure that it for Lord of the Rings, it's got to feel like it's part of the world. And so there's a really good balance there, I think, that the team did, especially at Wētā, but also with Kate Hawley and everyone. And so that journey was a long journey, and was being able to do things like digital Hobbit feet, and then digital background pull-on orc masks and limbs and stuff. But then it was that they said that they were struggling to find the cast for the Uruks, in New Zealand. They were like, we're struggling to find these Uruks. We're not really sure. And I was like, oh, really? And then I just was like, oh, okay. Have they talked to Jed? Have they talked to Phil? They talked to, and they're like, oh, no. And I just basically dropped my agent a line and said, hey, do you want to talk to the casting director? Right. And I think the casting director just drew a blank. She just, and obviously they sometimes people just forget, or they just go, I don't know how to get contact, or they don't want to do that or whatever. But anyway, they contacted my agent, and then it was me, Phil, and Jed got put forward, and did the audition, and then I was obviously gearing up to work on the orcs or the Uruks or the warlords as they were called. I might be breaking NDAs by saying that, but I don't really care. But anyway, they're just pseudonyms. But yeah, so the Uruks that we were starting to get them ready. I was just going, oh well, it'd be cool to play one, even if it's just in the BG or whatever. But then they're kind of like, no, you've got the gig, and then I was like, whoa, okay. Up to Auckland. That joke never gets old. Off up to Auckland for 6 months to play the Uruks with the team.
Yeah.
I mean, mate, like I've known Jed Brophy for 25 years, and I've known Phil for the same amount of time. I knew Phil much more as a performer and watching his work on the original show. And so being able to go up there and then with the stunt team that I'd now formed a pretty good alliance and friendship with, firstly for putting a lot of the guys in the makeup, and now I'm in the makeup myself. It was a dream come true. Like, to be quite honest, to stand on set with Jed Brophy and Phil Grieve and the whole stunt team, and be able to call them to be the general, calling them to battle, and
that's pretty.
It was bloody awesome, man.
Yeah,
I loved every minute of that.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. No, that's this is not the same thing, but I will say the highlight of the last 2 Comic-Cons for me has been sitting at the same booth as Jed and just hanging out with Jed for, a couple days there at Comic-Con, because he's just such a fun guy to be around. What do you have any favorite stories about your time with Jed or Phil?
Well,
appropriate or inappropriate, it doesn't matter. The
funny thing is that for Jed and I, as I said, because I've known him for 20 plus years, but I watched him on playing Shaku, and just in awe of this amazing performer, this amazing actor. And then I got to meet him and realize he was an absolute dick. No. Realized that he was such a lovely and gracious actor, but also cheeky, just like me, really cheeky. And so whenever we'd perform together before Rings of Power, we were always a little bit funny with each other, and having a good laugh. But then together on Rings of Power, man, we got us some really dodgy stuff. Just really pushing a line between because wearing prosthetics, as me and Jed talk about a lot, and wearing creatures suits, it's not fun. It's sticky. It's early morning calls, contacts and dentures, and going to the bathrooms are pain. And so it can be quite hard. And if people go insular and you start worrying about what's not comfortable or how you're not feeling, it can be quite a bad ride. Yeah. And so Jed and I, because we are this way anyway, you try and stay positive and try and stay happy and try and stay upbeat. But we're also trying to get the rest of the crew, the other performers around us, to stay happy and upbeat. And the best way to do that is to cause shit. so we'd try and figure out what, because there's calls on set, like rolling camera and cut there and things like that. And so we would try and find out what the black speech was for it. And so when they roll camera, we'd be like, like that, and yelling it out as loud as we can. Doing things like pushing each other in the middle of a take to see like where the other one's off camera, and just get your hand up behind camera and just go like, and just give them a push and trying to stay still. Just messing with each other, the whole time, but in a fun way. But then also really getting in on each other's things and role playing on set and being risque and just always being cheeky. It's so much fun. That's really, really fun.
Now, one of the people you got tossed around by in Rings of Power a bit, well, maybe, I don't know if your character got tossed around by him, but a character doing a fair amount of tossing was Ismael Cruz Córdova's character, Arondir. And I know, talking with Jed, he spoke very highly of of working with Ismael. Did you get tossed around by Ismael as well?
I did actually.
Nice.
So in the trench fight, there's a bit of that sequence. Is we did a bit bigger battle for that trench fight, but for time it got cut out. But at the same time, the sequence where we come running out and then we pull on the chain. He flies through the air, and that he's hitting me.
Nice.
And and so Ismael and I met him, and I actually met him first at the workshop. So I met him at the workshop, and I was obviously getting his ears prepped, because I was at that point I was going to be looking after the prosthetics at workshop. And then I handed the mantle on to a lovely man called Jake Avell, who did the rest of the job, and he did a bang up job. I met him at Wētā Workshop, and then I met him again in Auckland, and he was like, "Oh, hey man." I'm like, "Hey," and he's like, "So you down here?" I'm like, "No, I'm playing one of the Uruks," and he was like, "Oh, okay, cool, that's sweet," and he was really open and lovely, and he's such a cool guy. Like he's like it just oozes charisma, but also he's cheeky as hell as well. Like he's constantly like making jokes, and and he's one of these actors he can turn it on a dime. He can be right in the scene and then cuts and then just turn and be like do an off camera remark or whatever. He's super fun as well, but also and I think me and Jed spoke about this, really determined and really hard working. And his action sequences, he really wanted to do them himself. And I remember watching him going, man, that guy's good. And the stunt team were like, he's good, but he's also worked really, really hard. And so his double, he had a couple of doubles that they did a lot of stuff, but he did a lot himself. Like he's in wires, he's doing that fight with the big orc, and then went with the bit where we're pulling on the chain, and then he does the spin round and he stabs me in the neck. That's him on a wire being yanked towards me, however fast, hitting me in the neck. Like it's, I'm a stunt performer and an actor, but I'm still, in that circumstance, I'm an actor. So you got two actors that you got your lead actor and you've got a support actor, and he's being fired at me, hitting me in the neck, smashing me on the ground. And I'd say like 9 times out of 10, he hit the right spot.
Wow.
He was just a joy to work with, and you look at him going, and he's a leading man. He felt in the zone, and it was really cool. Actually, a funny story about that sequence though. So we run up and we pull the chain, and he's got to spin and hit me. And we did the sequence, and then we did a round of pickups, just kind of to dial it in a bit more, and specifically that shot where he does it. And so they wanted to have a bigger hit, and so I was just going to go onto my back. But they wanted me to fly up and have my legs actually come up in the air and then smash on the ground, and they're shooting it in slow-mo, so it's always a bit harder. And so that meant that Ismael really had to punch me and like push me and make me fly, because I'm not on a wire. I'm just being pushed by him and throwing myself. And so they were like, okay, quick, we'll get you a pad. And I'm like, oh, okay, like a little gel pad in my shoulder. I'm like, okay, sweet. Anyway, they put it in like that. We do one take, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was a pretty good hit. And okay, do another take, like that. And they're like, okay, we're gonna go fast, make up the days. And then I'm like, there's something at my foot, and I'm like, what's that at my foot? And I'm like, oh, that's the pad. And I kicked it out of the way. It's like an action, bang, and it was like, it just smacked me in the shoulder. But totally worth it. And then I think it was like 2 takes later, Andy Stalline came in, one of the fight choreographers, and he was like, how's the pad, bro? And I'm like, oh, it's over there. Didn't really use it after take 2. But and Ismael's the same, just whatever needs to get the shot done. A joy.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, looking back at the last 20, 25 years, you've obviously gained a lot of experience both on the workshop front and the prosthetics and special effects, and also in getting tossed around in the stunt world. And, also with that, the acting. If you were to meet through time travel young Luke, what kind of advice, maybe to make some lessons easier, say, hey, young Luke, you should do this. What would you say to yourself?
It's a really interesting question, because I look back on what I've done, and I look back at who I was when I was 12. So when I was 12, if you had told me this is where I would be, I would have thought it was hogwash, or I would have been like, no, that's not. And and in all honesty, I have I hope I don't have delusions of grandeur. I know I'm a bit player and I'm a creature guy, and some people might know me, and some people might have seen 4 or 5 of the films I've been in and never even think about me. But where I say is that I get to do 90% of the time, I get to do what I love.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the time. And I'm just really, really thankful that people like to watch it, and that some of them want to talk to me about making it. Like I think that's it's a really lovely thing. And so when I say where I am, I do really mean that I get to do what I love for a living. That's for me the success. And so being able to perform, being able to make cool stuff, it's great. And so saying that to my 12-year-old self, I'd be like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But then, and this is a big then, when I was 22, 23, 24, and I am an ambitious, driven person. I thought I was going to be the next whoever, I'll be the next Heath Ledger or the Sam Neill or the Russell Crowe. And so this 25-year-old actor thinking, and you have to think about that way. You have to think about that a little bit like that, and kind of driven. And and us Kiwis actually are pretty bad at it, about being like, I reckon I could do that, And so to turn around and be like, nah, being a driven man and be like, I'm going to be the next whatever. Yeah. I think the thing that I would say is that that's to my 25-year-old self. First, I'd slap him around the head and go, "You're going to go bald, mate. So that dream's going to disappear, just like your hairline." But more than that, I'd say, is that what you want, really? And why do you want it? And I think the thing is that it's about what drives you and what you have passion for. And I think the more I'm at the moment, I'm away. I'm on location for just a week, and my kids are 11 and 13. And it can be lonely as an actor and as a performer, because you're away a lot from your family, you're away a lot from your friends, and there's a lot to juggle. And so I think the thing is that although I'm not the next whoever, and you're never going to be, I get to do what I love. I get to play with my mates. I also, most of the time, get to do it down the road. Like a 25, 30-minute drive from my house at Wētā Effects or at Wētā Workshop. Every now and then I might, I'll go to Canada or go to Australia or, go around New Zealand. But I'd say, and this goes back to the 25-year-old, is that lean into also the passions that you have, and don't worry about, I want to be this or I want to be that. Just be happy with the fact that you're going to be hidden behind prosthetics. You're going to be, and what and this is getting really quite deep now. I hope that's okay. But I
absolutely.
Cool. I always remember talking to my mum when I was probably about, 13, maybe 12, 13, saying, my brother Ben was an amazing artist, as I said, sculptures and prosthetics and stuff. My brother Toby, he works for Google. He's a genius, like comparative to myself. I'm an idiot compared to him. But he's super, super intelligent, and he always has been, like, very, very gifted. And so I always said to my mum, I don't have anything special. There's nothing about me that I can do that's really great. And I never really felt it. And I remember her saying, oh, but you're really good with your body. You're really good with gymnastics and dance. And I'm like, that's not a thing that really, that's just movement and stuff. That's just me being me. But I think that's the thing is I resisted that for so long. I just was like, but I want to be an actor. I want to be an actor. I don't want to be a creature performer. I don't want to be a stunt performer, But now, that's all I want to do. Yeah. And I sometimes, when it's like I'll have to do a line and I'll have to do a few bits of dialogue again, I'm like, didn't we get it? Can I fall down now? I think it's being open to the journey and allowing it to take you where you want. Because I could have said no to going to work on Lord of the Rings. I was working as a waiter, getting ready to do a full-time course at NOTR in Australia as an actor. And I think about if I hadn't done that, I would never worked on Lord of the Rings, never met my wife. Never have had my kids, and never had the what I think is now. If I think back on it, I did model kits when I was a kid. I love creatures, gymnastics. This is where I should be is movement, creatures, and stuff like that. and it's niched, but it's and the recognition is so much, as I said, more personally driven through just enjoying what I do, which is I'm really lucky. It's great.
There's definitely a good life lesson there, I think, and you know it's like you said, it's great to have dreams and be driven by something, but you know, to have that flexibility and to follow what you're really passionate about. You know, it's funny how often you find yourself in a better situation than you might have otherwise forced yourself into if you hadn't followed that passion.
And don't let your dreams control you. And like I do remember when I was probably around 32 or 33, I remember mentally saying, I'm going to have to apologize to the mid-20s Luke. I have to let that mid-20s Luke go and let him know it's not going to happen the way you think it's going to happen. But that was really freeing, because now I'm like, hey, I still have a goal. I still know what I want. The difference is I've just changed the way I'm approaching it, or I've changed my dreams slightly and my goals. And that, I mean, that comes through with being mature. But that's what I say to my younger self, and anyone else who's wanting to get in the industry or wanting to do anything that's difficult or creative, is just be willing to adapt, and don't beat yourself up if it doesn't happen the way you want it to happen exactly. Because
Well, I'm gonna tell 12-year-old Matt that the astronaut thing is not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen, 12-year-old Matt. Sorry. This is better. But this is better.
We make rockets down in New Zealand, apparently.
Oh, hey, whoa.
So we need test pilots.
Oh my gosh. Oh man. Now I'm curious. I had a couple quicker questions for you. So you made this epic Sauron. I'm curious, do you have any characters or monsters or anything that you in the back of your mind think, oh gosh, I'd love to take a crack at making a sculpture of that for a future statue?
I do, and I am.
Oh, okay. So that's something we can't talk about.
Yes, we can't. I'm currently working on something when I have downtime. Which is not frequent, but hopefully I'm getting a break soon.
So that was one where Jules or somebody called you and was like, "Hey, how about this?" Or did you initiate it?
No, that was Jules' idea. And so when the time is right, I'll let you know what it is. But
we'll stay tuned. That's good. That's good. I'm excited. I'm excited that we'll have another piece of yours. And God bless Jules. That guy, he makes things happen. Love it.
Yeah. Because he's like us. He's a nerd.
Yeah.
He just loves it.
Yeah. No, and I'm hoping, just for everybody watching, I'm hoping we'll get Jules on here before too long, because I think he'd be a really fun one to talk to as well.
Hell yeah.
All right. Well, Luke, thank you so much for joining us and chatting with us for so long about your experience across your entire career. And it's always a pleasure chatting with you. I had a blast, when we were down in New Zealand, where we were just chatting for a couple hours there in the middle of crazy Wētā days for both of us at the time.
It was pretty crazy. Yeah, no, me too. It's great to chat to like-minded nerds. We're all nerds. It's just what flavor of nerd we are. I'm a big nerd.
Well, guys, it has been Mr. Luke Hawker with us today. Be sure to go check him out. Well, see if you can pick out Luke. See if you can pick out Luke out of all the apes in Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. See if you can pick him out. And Luke, give a shout out to the film that you're filming right now. You said it's a New Zealand film. What's it called?
It's a little horror film called Forgive Us All.
Forgive Us All. Okay.
Forgive Us All. Yeah, and it's a I don't want to say zombie, because it's kind of zombie, but not. Okay. But it's an post-apocalyptic kind of little thing, and it was interesting. I've only just started shooting on it yesterday. Sorry, but I read the script and I didn't really read where it was based, but Australian and New Zealand accents are prevalent, so there you go, basing it in Australia and or New Zealand. So a little Kiwi horror flick, but you'll see me in me, but I won't be looking as cheerful and as well fed as I currently do.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye out for Forgive Us All, and yeah, I'll be taking my kids to go see Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes for sure, because yeah,
it's fun.
It's yeah,
it's crazy.
It looks fun. Yeah, I mean, what's not to love? Apes like hunting down humans and stuff and taking over the world. It's yeah. What else do you want in your cinema?
Good everything.
Yeah. All right, Luke. Well, thank you so much again. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and we will see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.